Hello again. This, as you know, is another lecture in the series on consultative selling and relationship management. This one is called The Structure of the Meeting. When you meet somebody for the first time, when you meet a client for that first time, you need to have an idea of the structure for that meeting. The structure I'm going to show you, I've been using now for over 20 years. And even today, when I go to a meeting, especially a first meeting, I have quite clearly this structure in my mind. Of course, it will vary according to the reaction of the client, but the main structure is there in my mind and I find it extremely useful. So let's start off with the first part of it, and that is do your homework. That's very easy to do nowadays because most companies have websites. Most companies have an enormous amount of information publicly available to you. So there's no excuse for delaying going to see the client because you haven't done your homework. It's easy to do. If you can find out something recently that has happened for that company, especially something positive, obviously, you can then refer to that when you're talking to the company. Showing knowledge and showing that you've done your homework will impress the client. Second part of this structure is arrive early. Never be late. In the last 20 years, I have never been late for a meeting, and I'm very proud of that. But you really have to be very careful. Many of you will know when you go to the reception area in one of the big cities and you go into the bank or you go into the big company headquarters and you have to go through security and show them your passport or show them some form of ID. It can take 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get through all those different aspects of getting into the building. I always think of myself when I used to get people coming to sell to me, and you would get a phone call and the receptionist would say, that's Mr. Ryanson arrived for his 10 o'clock meeting. And the first thing you do is look at your watch and it's 10 past 10. Negative impression. So arrive on time, arrive early so that you are on time when you get there. Some cultures it's not so important. But actually, I don't believe that because I think it's important in all cultures. So be on time. Be early to be on time. Third bit, a good greeting. We're going to be doing this later on with first impressions as well, but the greeting is so important. A couple of little secrets that I have picked up over the years. You know, when you go to the reception area of any company, all the chairs are designed so that you can't get out of them. They're designed in such a way that they're extremely difficult to sit in and be comfortable. Well, the simple answer is you should never sit down in reception. If someone is coming to collect you, you should be standing up so that when they come towards you, you're there, you're ready to greet them with a good handshake, a smile, and eye contact. Critically important. It could be, of course, that somebody is taking you up to a room and that it's a receptionist or a secretary who is taking you to the room, and you have to wait there for the person to come in. But again, be standing, be ready to have that good greeting. Good handshake, eye contact, good greeting. Another little secret is remember their name. I always think the Americans are very good at it because when they introduce themselves, they say, hi, I'm Graham Einson, and the other guy says, I'm John Smith, and you say, hi, John. You repeat the name back to them, and that helps you to remember it. Another little secret. The next one is the business card. I like to do the business card. I think it's very important to do it right at the beginning. There are a number of reasons for this. The first one is that you don't forget. It's a good thing to do. The second reason is that it gives you the opportunity to get their business card and have a look at it. Let me show you how to do this. At the earliest opportunity, get your business card out and hand it to the client and ask them for theirs. Do you have your business card? Most of the time people do have it. Occasionally they won't, but generally they do. What you want to do then is to be very careful how you handle somebody's business card. You may well be aware that in the Far East and many of the Eastern cultures, you would always hand the business card to the client with both hands, like that. And you would also receive their card in both hands. And what you don't do is stick it in your pocket. That's regarded as being very poor manners, but actually it would be poor manners in the West just as much in the East. What you should do at that point, and all the research shows that it's not just in the East but across the world, you should take a moment to study the card that you've been given. And if possible, make a comment about something on it. You might comment on their position, their situation within the company. You might comment on the fact that it has a number of locations that the business is in. But it's good to comment on something on the card. And that gives you that first connection between you and the client. It's that first little thread of the relationship. And it's a very, very important thing to respect the cards. In Japan, of course, they would take the card out of a special holder and they treat it with great, great esteem. Another little secret about the business card is if you're meeting 3 or 4 people, then what I do is I actually put the business card down on the desk. And if there are 3 or 4 cards, I would put them in the order that people are sitting in. And that then allows you to remember their names and remember where they're sitting. Another of those little tricks that I'm sure many of you know, but some of you may not. The next part of the structure is indicated as small talk. We all know what small talk is. It's the chitter-chatter. It's thank you for sending me the directions. Yes, I found the office without any problem. I love your city. All of these different types of little small talk. In different cultures, small talk can be less or more important. If you go to the Middle East, for example, you'll find that small talk generally takes a long time. In fact, in the Middle East, very often the first meeting is almost just small talk. You don't actually talk about business, which is no use if you're only there for a short time. But nevertheless, culturally, it does vary. Sometimes you go to people where they're very direct and the small talk is very limited. That's fine. And you have to very quickly judge the character of the person that you're meeting. Actually, in one of the other lectures that we're going to do, we're going to talk about the different personality types and how to handle them. So you can look forward to that particular lecture. Back to the small talk. How do you get rid of the small talk? How do you move from small talk into the meeting? Well, the next section of this structure is the purpose of the meeting. And I actually use that phrase to get away from the small talk. I would actually say to them, well, thank you very much indeed for your good instructions and everything. As you know, the purpose of the meeting today is just an exploratory meeting to see if any of our services may be of value to you. And that's how I would then introduce that. And what I would then say is, let me introduce myself briefly and my company, and then more importantly, what we'll do is we can talk and find out more about your business. So that's the purpose of the meeting. It's quite a good phrase to use, and it gives you control of the early part of the meeting, and it allows you then to do your introduction. Now, as you know, in the very first lecture we talked about your brief introduction, yourself, your company, and your role. So I'm not going to go into that, but this is your moment to use that practiced, well-practiced introduction and impress the client with its brevity, but also its relevance to them. Next part of the structure is something that very few of you will have come across. And I think this particular section, called the motivating question, makes the difference between a good salesperson and a great salesperson. The motivating question allows you to ask the client permission to ask them questions. Let me explain what that means. What I would say to the client is, John, it's very nice to meet you. In order to make the best use of our time here together, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Only once in the last 20 years, when I've asked that question, has anyone said no. And he said, no, you may not ask me questions, I'm going to ask you questions. But let's not go into that one. That's once in 20 years. So let's say that it always works. Another idea of the motivating question might be, so that I get a better understanding of your business, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? In each case, people say yes back to you. And what happens then is they are prepared to answer your questions. It doesn't appear to be like an interrogation. It allows you to ask open questions, which gives you the information that you're looking for. The next section is called questioning, and we're going to do a whole lecture just on questioning. So I'm not going to do that at the moment. But this is where the bulk of the meeting will take place. I remember the very, very first meeting I went to when I was selling training for the first time. And I had role-played the meeting time and time again with my colleague in the office. And I remember going there and sticking exactly to this structure and learning how to question properly. And I remember the meeting lasted an hour. And in that hour, I talked probably for about 7 or 8 minutes. He just gave me all the information. I had used the motivating question and then I questioned correctly. We'll be talking about that again, but that's the bulk of the meeting. The next part is checking the needs. This is where during the questioning session you check what it is that they are looking for. They give you some information, you want to check that. So you check the needs of the client. And of course that's what we're there for. We're there to find out what the needs of the client are so that hopefully we can satisfy those needs when we come back to present or pitch to them. Check the needs. Come up with a solution. Now, the solution might not be, this is what we'll do for you right now, because if it's complex, which very often it is, you'll find that that's probably not the right way to do it. What very often the solution is to say, well, Mr. Client, it's been very nice meeting you and I've got all this information from you. What I suggest I do is I come back perhaps in a week or two and bring an expert with me in the particular areas that you're involved in. So the solution is not necessarily selling the product or the service to them. The solution might be, I'm coming back with more information. There is nothing that impresses a client more than if you repeat back all the information that they've given to you. I always remember I was working with one client and I sat there and I do mind maps when I'm taking notes. So I only have 1 page of notes with a mind map with lots of words all over it. And what I said, would you mind if I just summarised the information that you've given to me? And he said, yes, go ahead. And I just went round my mind map and I repeated back to him in key language every point that he had made. And he actually looked across and said, how did you do that? And it really impressed him. And of course I said to him, if you buy from me, I'll tell you how I did it. But that was my little joke. But at the end of the day, it's a very great skill to be able to summarise back to people. It impresses them no end. We'll be talking about closing again at a later date. And we're not talking here about closing the deal. We're talking here about a professional close at the end of an initial meeting, perhaps. And I believe that should be something in the order of, well, John, I've answered your questions and I feel that I would like to come back with one of my colleagues to talk to you again. When would be a good time for us to visit you again? And at that point, I would get the diary out and I would try to get a confirmed appointment. That is a close. That's a very important close. Don't leave it open and woolly. Nail it down. Nail down the next meeting. Nail down, will you take my phone call? Nail down, I will be sending you information. What information can you send to me? Nail it down. Be professional and commit to them what you're going to do and get a commitment from them as to what they're going to do. The professional close. Then, of course, the danger of leaving. You go back into small talk again. Better not to. When people realise the meeting is coming to an end, you have to think about the person that you're talking to. They know that the hour is nearly up. They know they're already thinking about what they're going to do next. So thank you very much, John, and get out as quickly as you can. Leave. Don't go back into little conversations. Get out and, most importantly, follow up very quickly after the meeting. That's the structure of a meeting. I've been using it all these years. I suggest that you use it as well. It works. See you for the next lecture. Thank you.